All right. Welcome to A New Way. We're so glad you're here. Yes. This is going to be a night of great storytelling. You are going to hear funny things. You are going to hear sad things. You are going to hear shocking things. And everything belongs. Everything is safe. You are safe here. And we are, again, just want to honor the fact that this isn't a church space, but you do not have to feel like you are in a church space in what you share and how you react. It's all good here. One thing I do, if you want to draw attention to, is a memorial we have for Ava, who is Danny's friend. So I'm going to invite Danny up for a minute and share a little bit about Ava. So Danny, come on up.
Hi, I'll be out later on to tell a story, but I would like to make a dedication to Ava Hudson. Ava Hudson was a friend of mine. We met through a support group. She was a lovely young transgender woman, and she tragically took her own life back on August 7th of this year. She has left behind a lot of friends and family that are desperately trying to understand. And we realize that it is difficult to comprehend what being transgender is like, but respectively request of you to just be kind and be aware that everyone you meet, every day of the week, everyone you meet is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. May we have just a moment of silence in honor of Ava Hudson. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danny. All right, I am going to introduce, we're ready to get started. So I'm going to introduce Archie, and Archie is the curator of OutSpoken. So Archie is the organizer and a fantastic storyteller. And Archie puts all of this together and makes it run. So I'm going to introduce him, and he's going to be our MC throughout the evening as well. So Archie, let's go.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to OutSpoken. I just want to follow up Danny's dedication. I always love when we have someone who is trans speaking at our OutSpoken events, but I also find that many trans people are scared to share their story at our events. So if you know any trans people who would like to share a story, please let me know, because we're more than happy to highlight their story and help them work on their story. And or they just want to come to the first OutSpoken and see that it's a safe space, that's awesome too. So I just wanted to tag that on. But welcome to OutSpoken. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary about a couple weeks ago. So very happy to be here. At OutSpoken, we always share a little bit of gay history. So I've brought some gay history, or queer history, really, for us. In 1980, the Democratic National Convention opened in New York City and became the first convention from a major political party to have a gay rights plank in its platform. So not bad. Still waiting for the Republicans to do the same. I'm sure that I will be dead by the time that happens. All right. In 2008, Chief U.S. District Judge Vaughn Walker of San Francisco overturned Proposition 8, the 2008 referendum that banned same-sex marriage in California on the grounds that it violated the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. So now we can all get married. And then we get divorced, or we have buddies who are married people like I do. You know, it runs the gamut. All right. We're going to have 6 storytellers for you today. Their stories are their own stories. So don't come to me if you disagree with them or want to share love with them. Please go to them and share your love for them with them, because they want your love. Maybe just talk to a wall if you want to share your hate. Yes. Yeah. I've come up with a great idea. All right. Our first teller is Jim Johnson. Jim uses he, him pronouns. He will soon celebrate 21 years of marriage. to his incredible wife, Jenny, who I've come to know and love very much, and is the father of two queer young adults. He and his wife have run a very successful in home daycare. I really often wonder what that looks like. Um, in the western suburbs together for more than 2 decades. He volunteers with Youth Outlook and Equality Downers Grove, most recently a monthly meetup for the LGBTQ plus community out there. He is hoping to help give today's LGBTQ youth the education and opportunities he never had, as well as change society's narrative and create an inclusive world for all of us. I feel like you're running for president, Jim. Most of all, he loves having a good time, hanging out with friends, and especially making new ones. Please welcome Jim to the stage.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, first time holding the mic, but that's fine. I know I could clip it. So hello. When I was a kid in early primary school, I liked nudity. The human body undressed, female, male, excited me. I just assumed it was like that for everyone. All the other boys my age were just as interested in seeing girls and boys naked. Then one day in junior high, one of those troublemaker type boys brought a realistic looking dildo to school. As the other boys huddled around, joking and laughing, their reactions to it made me realize quickly that if you're a boy who is interested in boys and their boy parts, you're not normal. Girls and their girl parts, sky's the limit, but not boys. So at 12 or 13, I began the lie that I was in fact not interested in boys or their parts. Somewhere in the next few years, I learned the term bisexual and immediately knew that was me. Still, I had no queer friends or family, no bisexual representation in television or movies. Hell, the bisexual flag had only been created a year or two before this time. I only ever seen gay men being depicted as comic relief, dying of HIV, or horribly bullied. So in my early to mid-teens, I began feeling the shame associated with the side of me that liked and wanted to see guys in all their glory, to maybe even do things with such guys. Around that time, the internet came to live with us. And I would spend many a night looking at porn of all kinds in the darkness of our family dining room where the only computer in the house was, while my parents and sisters slept. Female, male, trans male, it was all the same, all just as beautiful and all just as erotic. I'm not sure I knew about clearing browsing history back then, so that was probably interesting for my parents to eventually find. Who knows? Maybe they found it more interesting than I know. I'm not asking. I now, however, began to feel like there was something wrong with me, something I can never talk about, some sickness or obsession within me that needed to be cured, that needed to be kept in the darkness. The next stage of my life was spent trying to feel like I belonged, trying to fit in, trying to date and find love so I could get married, have sex, because you're not supposed to have sex until you get married, and start a family. That's all I knew. That's what was expected of me in my life. In the world around me, in all the movies, television shows, love songs, that's the way it always was. That's what I was told to believe. Eventually it worked. I managed to come off straight enough to land a wife. And shortly after that marriage ended, my amazing current wife. I did it. I achieved society's goals for me. A woman I love, fulfilling sex life, kids, a house in the western suburbs. It's the picture-perfect cisgender heterosexual life. It didn't stop me from still wanting to see those naked guys, though. I never really could get them out of my head and the things we could do together. So the lies, shame, and feeling like there was something wrong with me gave way to hiding. Hiding that part of who I was. By me was securely in the closet where he had always been, with hetero me standing in front of the door. Nothing to see here. Nothing at all. 17 years later, in the summer of 2021, I began training with Youth Outlook, an amazing organization that provides safe spaces, care, and education for LGBTQ plus youth and allies all over the northern Illinois suburbs, and has been doing so for 25 years. An organization that, unfortunately for me, started well after I was a teenager. I came to them as a 45-year-old ally, now with queer children of my own. Children we wanted nothing more than to love, protect, and see thrive. I, however, was still hiding, still guarding that closet door, but determined to make a better world for my youth and all the queer youth in need of care, compassion, and community. What I didn't expect was what the adults who ran this organization and volunteered their time, and these youth trying to live their authentic lives, would do to me. How their stories and the stories of past LGBTQ plus people would rock me to my core. I seen myself in so many of these beautiful people and stories from this community. Then a new feeling. Now I felt guilty. Guilty because though I had my own struggles, my own issues involving my identity and my sexuality, I had managed to avoid a lot of the trauma so many others had faced. By leaning into my hetero side, I was able to live freely the way many LGBTQ plus community members could not. I was sad and angry for what the queer community had endured for the past 35 years of my life and beyond. It was the guilt of someone who should have been there, standing alongside. By me was now loudly banging on the closet door, desperate to be seen, heard, and loved. Desperate to right the wrongs of the past. I quickly began to realize if I was going to be part of this great organization, if I was going to empower these youth, my youth, to become and live life as their authentic selves, I was going to have to come out of that closet. Now I was scared. Scared of how only one person would react, my wife. So at the age of almost 46 and having been married 18 years, I did it. I came out of the closet. Kind of. It was during one of our quick weekends away. I tried to tell her at dinner, in the car, in our hotel room. I tried to say it, to bring it up, but I couldn't. Those feelings I lived with for so long held me back. In the end, she knew anyway. She said she had always known something deep inside, and she asked me, "Are you bisexual?" Then I said it out loud for the first time in my life. I am bisexual. It was an emotional moment for both of us. She was scared too. Similar to me, scared of rejection, that I would no longer want to be married, that something drastic was now going to change in our lives. The rest of the weekend continued amid many feelings, questions, and conversations, many of which are still continuing today as we discuss how this changes us and what our journey forward together looks like. All we know for sure is we still love, care for, and are committed to one another, our marriage, and our family. It has been almost 3 years since that conversation, since saying those words for the first time. My wife, my person, my ride or die, loves me and accepts me, finally gained to begin to see all of me, my full authentic self. Since then, I've said it out loud many times to many others. Not everyone in my life knows, and I don't feel like they need to, though I would no longer hide it. I have a new and amazing group of friends. I continue to volunteer with Youth Outlook. Actually, I'm now employed by Youth Outlook. And also with Equality Downers Grove. I organize monthly meetups for the LGBTQ plus community in and around Downers Grove. I love going to Pride events to finally express myself outwardly in a way that is more comfortable and empowers me. I finally feel seen and accepted. Now the lies, shame, hiding, and feeling like there's something wrong with me are being replaced. Replaced with truth, pride, visibility, acceptance, and self-love. So when they say representation doesn't matter, fuck them. Representation is everything. If that 10, 13, 16, or 20-year-old me had been told, had seen, had been taught that there is a beautiful spectrum of sexualities, identities, ways of living and loving in this world, I think that me would have been a much more confident person, a much happier person. I think that me would have treated themselves much better than they did. Those out there that refuse to allow progress, that refuse to allow humanity to evolve beyond who we were and into what we could be, say we indoctrinate others to believe what we want them to. The irony is that they have been the ones doing the indoctrinating for decades upon decades. I was indoctrinated my whole life to be who they thought I should be. But in the end, I managed to still become who I always was, my beautifully bisexual self. Representation matters. The right to be our authentic selves matters. And I will speak out for that right for the rest of my life. And in order to continue those rights, Kamala and Walls this year. Thank you.
We're not going back. We're not going back. We're not going back. All right. I want to thank Jim and Jenny because I don't have a lot of good examples of marriages in my life, and I know I don't know your everyday, but hearing about your marriage, I'm like, huh, is that what it's like when somebody loves you? Oh, that is so. I would like to experience that. Oh no, I mean I've been loved. I'm not. Please, I'm fine. But I'd also like to apologize to my father, who definitely cleared my browser history when I was growing up. And another shout out to Jim because we said dildo in church. Dildo, 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 dildo. Okay. I once did a storytelling show where I flashed the whole audience with a dildo that I had in between my legs, and that's why I'll be going to heaven. That's right. God likes that. Our next storyteller is Terry Hazel. Oh, that's a good one. I should do that one more. Okay. Having lived in Illinois now for more than a decade, Terry is a longtime transplant from Texas. He is very vocal about queer rights and creating safe spaces. His passions include racial reconciliation and diversity, systematic injustice, and mass incarceration issues in this country, insecure housing, and animal rights. Yes. Why did animal rights catch me the most? I need to go home and journal about that. I'm sorry. Also, he is the co-founder of a New Way Church. Please welcome Terry to the stage.
Thank you, Archie. As Archie knows, I have a really hard time maintaining a microphone, so I'm gonna work really hard to do that tonight. This is a church, but if any of you have heard me speak before, my stories are not very churchy, so you may have to go to the wall after I speak. So I was sharing a story with my friends, the Clarks, about a week and a half ago, about how I came to get crabs from a one-legged hooker. And if some of you may not know what crabs are, because back then, grown-ups had pubes. I'm just saying. So, so so anyway, Leslie insisted I tell this story, and I wasn't sure how I could tell this story, so I figured I would tell the story that led up to the incident. I had just been sentenced to 6 years probation, but the judge wanted me to do 6 months or a year in a work release program. Up here, they're called transitional centers, I think. It was my first time there. It was not my last. Soon after I got there, I I clicked with a lot of people, people with mutual interests. I met a really nice young woman that I liked, and we started hanging out. And things were going pretty well. It was definitely making my time go faster. You didn't get to look for a job until you'd been there for at least a month. And so she helped me when my month was up. She helped me understand bus routes and, figure out unemployment offices. And she even got me a job where a friend of hers worked at a car detail shop in downtown Houston. So, things were going really well, except there was a woman who came in shortly after named Charla. Charla. Charla was not such a good person, but she was stunning. She was probably one of the most beautiful creatures I had ever seen until, I started knowing her, and then that all changed. She grew like 12 heads. But, but anyway, she she started insinuating herself into all of my situations. When I was trying to talk to the other girl, she would come and interrupt and sit in the middle of it. She would, like, whatever I was doing, she kept showing up there. And then she would show up and, like, bring me coffee, and you get points for bringing me coffee. That's, but, but when she finally got to where she was able to go out and look for a job, the first thing she did was show up unexpectedly at my job. And so we had sex on the toilet in one of the nastiest men's room in the state of Texas. Ugh. When I can still see it in my head. She never did get a job, and she was starting to get some heat because they could send her back to prison. She decided she would rather escape, and she wanted me to do that with her. Well, I had a paycheck coming, and I would have another one coming behind it. And so I waited until payday, went and got my check, and we took off. And we kind of couch surfed for a couple of days, and then we caught a bus to downtown Houston and found this hotel called the Montague. And we got a room on the top floor at the Montague, level 2. This was a cheap, sleazy, and it had communal bathrooms and showers. I mean, this is this is really a disgusting place. But yeah, it was within our means. So anyway, we decided we were going to get something to drink and take it back to our room. And I don't know, Charlotte liked this drink called Cisco. And some of you may remember all the lawsuits against Cisco a few decades ago because Cisco made people do really crazy shit. And so I don't even know if they make it anymore, but if they do, I'm sure they change the ingredients. But there was a dude across the way, and he saw us coming in. I had my beer, and she had her Cisco, and he offered, if we shared a couple of beers, he offered to bring over some weed. And I was like, yeah, come on, bring it, right? And so he came over with the weed and a boombox, a little boombox. And see, I just started talking on my own. Now I got to go back. So anyway, the guy and I were just bullshitting and getting high, and Charlotte's dancing around to the music on the boombox. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she just strips off all of her clothes. And she's dancing around. She dances straight up to me. And this dude is just like, he's glued to his seat. But anyway, so she dances over to me naked, and sits completely down on the neck of my beer bottle. Yes, I looked over at dude and said, "Brother, you got to go." So, I do want to mention, a couple of other interesting things that happened while at the Montague before I go much further. There was one time I like to sit in the window and drink my beer, and it was an open thing, so you could yell back and forth to the people on the street. And this dude was running by, covered in blood and sirens behind him, and he saw me and he yelled up, "I need a shirt!" And he stripped off his bloody shirt, and I ran and got a shirt and threw it down. To this day, I have no idea what I was part of. So it could have been anything. Then there was the time that a guy came by. He was on the sidewalk below, obviously first floor. I'm in the second story window. He asked me if I want a joint. So, of course, I'm trying to reach the first floor sidewalk from the second story window. And he's stretching up and I'm stretching down. Didn't work. And yeah, I fell out of the window and landed crotch first on a metal awning that had long ago lost its canvas covering. I will tell you, the pain of that was so intense, I could not utter one sound. I have never experienced anything like that in my life. Okay, now you know, things got a little wild at the Montague. But money was starting to get low, and I needed to get a job. And so I needed a job that didn't ask too many questions. So I found a day labor place that was in walking distance from the hotel, and they don't ask any questions. In fact, they initially put me to work in an emergency room hospital for high risk infants. Yeah, and I'm on the run, right? Yeah. So think about that. Anyway, if they give you a ticket, a job ticket, you go out to a job, and if they call you back for the duration of that job, then you kind of get a good rep, and the labor place will keep sending you out on jobs and give you longer tickets and better jobs. So of course that's what I did. So I was working every day, but Charlotte couldn't get a job, and the reason is because she was a federal prisoner. And being a federal prisoner is significantly different from being a state prisoner. I will tell you that. No one was really looking very hard for me. They were definitely looking for her. So, like, she hid out at the hotel, and while I was at work during the day, she stood up at the front desk and bullshit with the guy behind the counter all day. And then, of course, I would come home with booze, and we would start that whole wildness all over again. Anyway, about a year later, it's funny. I was in the Harris County Jail in Houston. I was awaiting sentencing for, after they captured me for this same crime, because obviously they didn't think they were gonna put me back on probation, and they didn't. So anyway, there was a federal agent came to see me with a subpoena. And I'm tell you this, the feds don't play. I've been subpoenaed before by the state, and it read, "You are hereby ordered by the state of Texas to appear." That's not how a federal subpoena reads. It said, "You are hereby commanded by the United States of America to appear." And I was like, holy shit. So anyway, it turns out that Charlotte had been captured, and she had told the feds that I had kidnapped her, and that when she had finally escaped from me, that she was scared to turn herself in. So yeah, I had to do all kinds of, I had to write all kinds of statements, and it was just like a whole thing. It even messed up one of my possibilities for parole because they were afraid that I would run. So, yeah, thank you, Charlotte, wherever you are. But anyway, sometimes, here and there, we'd go hang out with some of her weirdly criminal friends. And she started telling me these weird stories, which included a lot of bedroom violence. And she told me about this time when she had sex with a loaded machine gun. And you might ask at this point, how far is too far? This was too far. Ouch. And yeah, it was too far for me. And so we had some serious disagreements that evening. And when I got back from work the next day, she was gone. But anyway, so after that, I started meeting other people at the hotel. One was David. He had wealthy parents in New York who sent him a small amount of money every month to keep him away, pretty much. The money wasn't enough, though, because David had a crack habit. So to supplement his income, David stood at busy intersections in affluent neighborhoods with a cardboard sign asking for money. He actually did pretty well. See, David had only one arm and one leg. Yeah, I don't know if any of you ever tried to hop a train, but trying to hop a train that's going 8 miles an hour, especially while intoxicated, is a very bad idea. He reached for the rail, he slipped underneath, and he lost his arm, his left arm at the shoulder, and his left leg at the knee. So yeah, that lends for some sympathy, especially when you refuse to wear the arm. Anyway, David and I became very good friends, and through him, I met many others at the hotel. Two of the people were George and Georgia. And George was a drunk and a drug addict, and Georgia was a prostitute, and they fought pretty regularly. Unfortunately, Georgia also only had one leg. I have no idea how she lost her leg. It was the right one, in case anybody's curious. But whenever they would have a big fight, George would take her prosthetic leg and leave. So she would be pretty much stranded at the hotel. And so one night in particular, George had taken her leg, and I decided to stop by her room. And I say this somewhat tongue in cheek, but it's not like she was going anywhere. So anyway, that is how I got crabs from a one-legged hooker. And maybe next time I'll tell you about the second time I was in that work release program. It involves Bengal tigers, plural, and no, Brian, not the kind from Cincinnati. Thank you, guys.
Oh, thank you, Terry. Oh my God. That reminds me of what Danny said. You can't tell what someone's been through, but just by looking at them. It also reminds me that not to trust anyone who can sit on a beer bottle, because that has happened in my life before. No details. All right. Our third storyteller is Danny Keel. Danny Keel is a proud, queer, transgender Christian woman who spent way too much of her life in the closet. She is just your average person that decided at the age of 68 that the most important part of life is to be authentic. Her mantra is, it's never too late. Please welcome Danny to the stage.
Following Terry is kind of difficult because I don't think I can make any kind of stories like hers. All my life, I have always been scared. I can remember when I was a little boy and I walked down the dark street. I grew up in unincorporated DuPage County in the 1950s. We lived in a quiet neighborhood where life was pretty uneventful. We had no crime. It was a safe neighborhood, and a lot of people that grew up there fondly look back at it now as the good old days. But yeah, I was scared. I don't know what I was scared of other than the dark, but I was scared. I'm not sure how old I was. when those memories were first formed, but I do remember that I knew that I shouldn't feel that way. Kids my age don't feel like that. It was one of my earliest memories of feeling different. My childhood, for the most part, was happy. I got along with almost everyone. Well, except for my brother Dave, but that's another story. We played at the park during the summer. I liked boy stuff. I liked baseball, football, basketball. I liked watching wrestling on TV. Boxing was big in those days. Saturday night, there was always a fight on TV. I watched a lot of matches until that night when Emo Griffith killed Benny Parent. I never watched boxing after that. Everybody else kept watching boxing, but I didn't. I was different. When my friends and I started going through puberty, life started to change. Sometimes young teenage boys start to experiment with each other. I know I did. I liked it. For most of my friends, it was just a phase. Soon afterwards, they got interested in girls. I didn't. I was different. When my friends and I when I was in the 8th grade, something happened to someone else that would deeply influence most of my life. The principal of my junior high, Mr. Jensen, was arrested in a raid on a gay bar. In the Chicago Tribune article published on April 27th, 1964, describing the arrest of 109 men, Lieutenant James Donnelly was quoted as saying, "Many of the men carried powder puffs and lipstick, and that some even wore wigs. That lounge has catered to the sex deviants from all over the nation." I saw Mr. Jensen on Friday. He was arrested on Saturday, and I never saw him again. For a young gay boy, I learned a lesson. Keep your mouth shut. Trust no one. I stepped into the closet knowing full well I was different. High school was not a pleasant memory for me. I tried real hard to be someone that I wasn't. I occasionally dated girls, went to a couple of proms even. I honed my skills at acting like I was the same as everybody else. But I knew it was a lie. After high school, I went away to college trying desperately to fit in and failing miserably. After 2 years, I dropped out and returned home. Occasionally, I would find some other deviant, but these sex acts never led to a relationship. My emotional baggage of guilt and fear made anything more than a one-night stand impossible. I also became very good at falling in love with my straight friends. After one of these frustrating and unfulfilling attempts, I sought out psychiatric help. My psychiatrist's advice was to try to go to places where I could meet girls, and he wrote me a prescription for Valium. Needless to say, neither his advice or the drugs helped. After I bought my first house, I found out that my next door neighbor was gay. He was a lot older than me, but we became friends, and eventually he became my gay mentor. I attended parties at his house, and I met a lot of his gay friends. I started to accept that I might be able to be myself for the first time in my life. And then my life took a U-turn. At a New Year's Eve party at his house, I met his niece. For the first time in my life, I met a girl that I actually liked And even more remarkably, she liked me also. 7 months later, we got married. I convinced myself that I could have a straight heterosexual life and that I was mistaken about who I was. We had a son together, and I relished the role of being a father. But 15 years later, we both became painfully aware that she was an alcoholic and I was still a deviant. We got divorced. So you would think that I would have come to grips with my identity by now. But once again, I fooled myself into thinking I could live a normal life. This resulted in a second attempt at a heterosexual relationship, the birth of my second son, and an equally painful ending. But out of the ashes of that failure, something good happened. After our breakup, we had gone back to being friends. My ex was financially struggling even with my child support. I had bought a 3-bedroom house that was only occupied by myself and my infant son on weekends. We decided to try a social experiment, and she moved into my basement so that we could raise our son together. 26 years later, my son is now fully grown, moved away from home, and recently got married. But our social experiment continues. We still remain best friends. About 10 years ago, I had finally decided that I could no longer keep pretending. Both my kids were adults. I could no longer tolerate my self-imposed closet. I joined an LGBTQ plus bowling league, Out Bowling. At Out Bowling, I made friends and started to grow as a person. A wonderful friend there recommended her church, Hope UCC in Naperville. It was an open and affirming church with a gay pastor and with a congregation where quite a few are members of the LGBTQ community. I joined that church, and a couple years later, during Pride Month, they invited some young people to give a talk about gender identity. I heard these people proudly talk about their own identities, and I began to ponder who I was. And as I thought about it, I traveled back in time for over 50 years before, when the Chicago Tribune talked about deviance, when Mr. Jensen's life had been destroyed by a misplaced morality. And I made a decision. I would no longer allow fear to rule my life. I gave myself permission to become me, and I have. So, yeah, I am sometimes still afraid, and I have happily and proudly accepted that I am different. But like the sign above my computer says, everything that you have ever wanted sits on the other side of fear. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Oh my God, I love coming to a new way because of these stories so much. I mean, I'm inspired by Jim's marriage. Danny's story shows that there's always new beginnings in life. Terry has made me feel like I'm not the horniest person in this room. But we're gonna take about 5 or 10 minutes, little break, because the second reason I love coming to a new way is this refreshment stand. It's amazing. There's watermelon agua fresca. There's a peach sangria. There's these roll-ups, and if you haven't had these chips that are they're crackers. They're trash. They're made in a trash bag, but they're delicious. So please take the next 5 minutes, 10 minutes, make this table disappear, and come back for more stories. Thank you so much.
All right, it's about that time. Grab your refreshments and come on back to your seats so that we can finish up our second half of our storytelling. All right. Come on back. Come on back to your seats. In 2 minutes, I'm going to start singing weird church songs. I told you this was a safe space, but I've got weird church songs up my sleeve. Good job. You can plug your ears. You'll want to. I can tell I'm going to be singing songs here soon. All right, grab your stuff and come on back to your seat. I said you got back like 1 minute, and then I'm going to start singing weird church songs. So I may never march in the infantry, ride in the cavalry, shoot the artillery. I may never fly or the enemy, 'cause I'm in the Lord's army. Yes, sir. I told you it was weird. I told you. Come on back. I've got more. Come on back to your seat. I am a C. I am a CH. Yeah, see, that's a scary one. Come on back. I am a CHRASTIAN. I told you. I know. I told you I was going to sing them if you didn't come back.
Hey, everybody, time to come back for more stories.
All right. Kat, can you double check that this? Nancy would like the mic stand. Can you maybe tell us where to put it so it's not right in the, maybe over here? Okay. All right. Do, 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 do. Man, why did we sing those weird songs? That was so bizarre. It felt so normal at the time. It felt so right. Oh, they are deep in my heart. There's a song about that, right? I was gonna sing. What is the deep in your heart? Like, I've got. Oh my gosh. Okay, quick story. While the final bit of us are coming. Great. That's great that we're live. So it tells you, and I'll share a little bit more about my story, but while people are coming up, but it does that we were just singing like these weird songs. I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Okay. If you know those songs. To tell you about the church that I grew up in, I literally the words are I've got peace that passes understanding. Okay. That makes sense. But did I grow up the whole time thinking something different? Yes. I thought they were saying I've got the peace of passive understanding. And I was like, okay, I guess that's what we're doing here. Just grin and nod. So, okay, we're back. Archie.
Give it up for Leslie. I know she made a lot of the stuff on the refreshment table. She's given us a concert. I'm overwhelmed. All right. Our first storyteller of the second half is Nancy Mullen. Nancy is the what? Oh, sorry. Nancy is the executive director of Youth Outlook, the first not-for-profit organization serving LGBTQ youth in Illinois. Nancy is celebrating 25 years with Youth Outlook this year, and so far has survived 2 terms of compassionate conservatism, a recession, 4 years of the last administration, a plague, a failed coup. She would now like to request the use of Elton John's I'm Still Standing as her official social work theme song. Please welcome Nancy to the stage.
Thank you, Archie. I live west of here in the town of DeKalb. if you've never been, and I know some of you probably haven't been, I'm looking at you, Archie. It's a small town surrounded by corn and farms and more corn and more farms. It's not exactly where I saw myself spending more than 2 decades of my life. That had more to do with loving Youth Outlook, not so much about loving DeKalb. In that little town, I live in an older neighborhood, probably the most diverse neighborhood in town. And living there, you get that small town feel. Like I am greeted by name when I walk into the bank. I am greeted by name when I walk into the bookstore. I am greeted by name when I walk into the Tux shop, where I have my favorite clerk. It's a little Norman Rockwell. And even I make fun of me for living there. It would have been easy to spend a lot of those years getting complacent in that kind of comfort, except for the challenge of my neighbors. If you've known me for any length of time, you may have heard me reference my neighbors in the rental property next door. They are a large family from Tennessee. And while I thought their arrival would be somewhat better than the college students who had lived there when I first moved in, it didn't take me really long to understand I was definitely not their cup of tea. It also didn't take long to realize they had one volume loud. Cars revving, motorcycles in the middle of the night, the blaring country music all weekend long from their backyard. Their voices, they do not converse. They yell, and the yelling about everything is usually filled with expletives. It was a rough road when they first moved in, and I was usually really grateful for the 6-foot cedar fence I put in my first summer there before they arrived. One June week a few years ago, I took a Friday afternoon off. I was going to plant some flowers in my backyard. So here I am, I'm playing in the dirt. It's one of my favorite things to do in the summer. And I can hear them on the other side of that 6-foot fence. And it was like I'd heard on so many other days, dike this and dike that, and how fun is it to park that dike in her driveway where she can't get out past the end of my truck and that fire hydrant. Yuck, yuck, yuck. This wasn't anything new. I'd been listening to these people by that point for several years. But that night, it didn't stop there. I did what I always do when I'm out and about with them and they're out and about. I tuned them out. This was in the middle of the Michelle Obama. When they go low, we go high. I tuned them out. I tuned them out until one of them, who, a gentleman in his probably at that point early 70s, approached the fence near where I was working, kneeling down in the dirt, unzipped his fly, and urinated on the fence just above me so that it splashed through the boards and onto me. I looked up to where my ex-wife was standing behind me. She was looking at me, and our conversation was completely interrupted, and I could see my own horrified expression mirrored in her face. It took 2 days for that to fully register with me what had happened. I was 52 years old. I have a master's degree, and I run an agency where I help kids. And that man called me a dyke and peed on me. I had to wonder if it took me at 52, with my social network and my professional status, 2 days to be able to begin processing that. What about the 12-year-olds whose families don't know? That idea turned my stomach. So it would have been really easy to disregard these people for the rest of the time that we had to live near each other. What happened in our next encounter, I would have never seen coming. About 2.5 months later, On a gorgeous September morning, I leashed up two of my dogs, Milo and Kiara, and we set out for our morning inspection of their street. You have to get your sniffs in, you know? We'd gotten 2 houses away, and Kiara lagged behind me, sniffing at the fire hydrant and the tree. So I called on her, let's step up the pace. We didn't get any further. Key collapsed on the driveway, maybe 60 feet from my house. I heard it before I saw it because bony dog elbows thumping concrete, that's unmistakable. It was quick. I don't think she suffered. The vet said it was a sudden cardiac issue, and it doesn't have any warning signs, so when it first shows up, it's typically fatal. I still had Milo on her leash, so I was unable to lift Kiara, to hold her as she was dying. I had had surgery on my shoulder the week before, so picking her up from a flat out position on concrete was absolutely impossible. I yelled for my neighbor whose driveway I had come to a stop in, "Scott, I need your help!" And before Scott was able to rush outside to see what was wrong, what I would expect from my neighbors, the Tennessee neighbor's door popped open, and one of the young women started to run across the yard at me. She relieved me of Milo's leash as Scott hit his knees in that driveway. His voice broke as he scooped Kiara up and held her gently. And he talked to her the entire time, telling her we were going to get her help. "Hold on, baby. We're going to help you. We're almost there." She was gone when we arrived at the vet just a few minutes later. I'm not even sure she was still with us when we got in the car. If she was, she died in Scott's lap on the way to the vet. And again, what I would expect from one of my neighbors, Scott stood on the sidewalk with me at the vet clinic, hugging me as we cried on each other's shoulders. It wasn't his dog. He got dragged into the middle of this. But he was that moved by what had just happened and what was playing out. And we cried as they carried her inside. When I got home, Milo was back inside my house. Her leash had been hung up at the door, and the door had been closed, courtesy of my Tennessee neighbor. I thought the least I could do, since she did come running out, was to go tell her what had happened and what the vet said. So as soon as I stepped outside, she is making a beeline across the yard again, and it hit me really quickly. She's watching for me. She's waiting for me to come home. I told her what happened, what the vet said, and with tears standing out in both of our eyes, we separated and went about our day. The following weekend, I watched the bonfire start, that bonfire I hated so much, that fills my house every weekend with fumes. I watched, and I waited for a break in the music. I took a bottle of Jim Beam and some shot glasses from my catering gear, and I marched myself up their driveway. I had no idea what to expect. They might have chased me away. They might have threatened me. I might have gotten my ass kicked. I don't know. I had no idea what was going to happen next. They didn't do any of those things. They just stared at me curiously and waited to see what I would say. I gave them the shot glasses and I poured them all a drink. And I asked them if they knew what had happened with the dog a few days before that. They knew a little. So I told them the whole story. They were quiet. They were clearly still surprised I was standing in their yard with them after the tension of the last several years. One of them asked with just a bit of a sneer in their voice if my wife was going to object to me being there drinking with them, drawing snickers and giggles from the rest of the crowd, and I think probably meaning to see if that was going to be a raw spot. And I shrugged and I said, she moved out last year. It's just me living there now. I didn't object to the question, nor did I try to deny that had been my wife. They stopped laughing. In that silence, I raised my shot glass and asked them if they'd join me in a toast. They did, still looking a little uneasy. I tipped the bottle of Jim Beam toward them and I said, let's have a toast to neighbors who come running when you yell for help. And the Jim Beam started to flow. The last thing the patriarch said to me that night as I stumbled back down the driveway was, baby, you come back here anytime. I do. They call me Ms. Nancy now, and they tell me they watch my house when I'm not home. They've also told me if they hear anything unusual at my house, they're going to come running, and they will not be empty-handed. That's good to know. The first summer, I told them I want up. I don't know what just happened to our mic. I wanted to put a pride flag up. They offered to give me one. I don't know what that might have become if Kiara hadn't died in such a way. I'm kind of glad I didn't have to find out. I mean, don't get me wrong. The music still drives me bonkers. The loudness still drives me bonkers. But I am reminded every day that allies come out of the cornfields sometimes and into our lives in very surprising ways. Thank you.
All right. And that is the reason Nancy Mullen is the executive director of Youth Outlook. She is just awesome and incredible. You could pass me some of that later. That's fine. And also, that's why animals are on the planet, to bring out the good in us and bring us together. I really think that. Okay. Yeah. Claps. All right. We got our next storyteller is the amazing singer, Leslie Rader Clark. Leslie is a mom to 4 kids and a cisgender heterosexual ally. While her career started with elementary education, she now spends her time in faith spaces working and dreaming of ways to make them more inclusive. She is an ambassador for the Reformation Project, a Master of Divinity student, and ready to fiercely protect her queer friends and family. Come up here and protect us, Leslie.
All right. I was going to hold the mic, but I guess it's fine here. We'll see. We're going to go with the spirit. I also was going to lift this mic stand, but that's also not going to happen. So where the spirit leads, we will follow. All right. It's me again. Yeah, I'm here as an ally, and I'm thankful for people, for spaces, for allies to share too, because now that my life is so beautifully filled with my queer friends, I just realized how important that role is. So I'm going to tell that story. My story begins in a really boring, predictable, super highly privileged way. I am the daughter of a very white, middle-class, cishet couple that just celebrated 44 years of marriage. I spent my Sundays at church, but without my parents. They knew a good deal when they saw one. So when my grandma offered to take us to church on Sundays and keep us through Awanas on Sunday night, because every good Christian goes to church twice on Sundays and probably also on Wednesday night, they were happy to oblige. We got up, we drove through McDonald's, and my parents dropped me off at the front of the church to meet my grandma, who was teaching Sunday school inside. And then they enjoyed 10 blissful hours with no children. Shout out to my parents. Who, P.S., this is not in my story, but I'm so excited. They live in Kansas City, Missouri, except they are moving here on Wednesday to be here with us and my babies. I know, I'm so excited. They are not babies anymore, but they're my babies. So My brother was 5 years old when his Sunday school teacher asked why his parents didn't come to church. And he came with grandma instead. And he said, they got shot. He told them very matter-of-factly, and my grandma very quickly corrected him. That is not, in fact, why they were fine. They did not, in fact, get shot. They were out living their best life. That's why. Where do I sign up for that? It's an important part of my story because hearing that Baptist religious dogma week in and week out can have some major effects on one's belief system. However, there's a reason my parents weren't at church. They weren't buying it. The hypocrisy, the sloppy study of scripture without regard to cultural context, the inability to see that when following scripture was harming people, it couldn't possibly be from God. So while I spent each Sunday memorizing Bible verses, my parents kindly and eloquently pointed out the different ways to think of things when I would share what I was learning when I was at church with grandma. I wasn't aware of any queer family or friends until I was in late elementary school or middle school. I remember my parents telling me about their family friend's daughter, Melody. Hey, honey, you know how Melody has been hanging out with Lindsay a lot? Well, they're more than just friends. And I'm not exactly sure how I responded, but I remember them saying that I'm sure I asked a question about how it related to church and what I had been told. But I remember that my parents said that they knew that being gay could not have been a choice because no one would choose to be discriminated against and have so much pain on them, like willingly. No one would choose that. And that stuck with me. And I couldn't rationalize how God would create queer people, but then tell them that they're wrong. It didn't make sense. I danced between what my church was saying to be true and my conscience until I was well into adulthood. I followed a very traditional trajectory, a couple of boyfriends, successful high school student, a very formative college experience. And I came out at the end of all of that with a fiance, a few friends in the queer community, and a still strong desire for the study and following of Jesus to be a part of my life. And even more sure that being queer could not possibly be wrong. I got married, and I still happily am to my husband of 18 years, who, by the way, always looks at me a bit sideways after outspoken storytellers share how they were married to men, but then realized their life would be much more fulfilling if married to a woman. And I do love a good pair of Birkenstocks, so I can see how he's suspicious. I love you. I'm going to keep you and my Birkenstocks, and I'll forever fight for the freedom for queer people to be with who they love, both legally and within the church. So that leads me to another important man in my life. It's my pastor, my old pastor. I was attending a church for 13 years and was led to believe that they quietly believed the same thing that I did about God's queer children. We're all included. The sign said that everyone was welcome. Surely a church wouldn't say that if it weren't true. But sadly, after over a decade of attendance, involvement, donations, we learned that that wasn't the case. It was a bit of a slow process to learn this. It started when I read the book Unclobber by Colby Martin with the subtitle Rethinking Our Misuse of the Bible on Homosexuality. That led me to other books and speakers and the Reformation Project, whose mission is to further the inclusion of the LGBTQ community within the church while still honoring scripture. After a weekend conference in Phoenix, I came back ready to share everything I was thinking with my pastor. Let me tell you this, that you have not lived until you find yourself at Ellie's Deli talking about pederasty and penetration with your pastor. It was at that meeting, though, where I knew that this church was not what I thought it was. Not everyone was welcome. Just as I can't invite people to dinner and not let them eat, a church should not tell everyone that they are welcome and not let them participate fully. I knew I had really hit a dead end at this comment, though. I wish I were kidding when I tell you this part. I said to him, honestly, I'm most worried for the youth. And he said, we don't need to worry about them because they shouldn't be having sex because they're not married. I was like, I think we're all done here. I'm not even sure where to start with that. But okay. And church was different for me from that point forward. Each week I wore a pride shirt and I got a lot of thumbs up and nice shirt from people also in attendance. But in January of 2021, the message was loud and clear. Actually, I think I got a text from Megan. Hey, Megan. Sorry about the trauma. The queer community was no longer welcome, and they never really were. It was the catalyst for so much in my life now. I needed to know what scripture was being used that let the spirit of love and inclusion be taken away from the theology around queer people. The Reformation Project has an ambassador program that's an intense study of those scriptures, sexual ethic and antiquity, and moral arcs within the biblical context. I completed that program in 2021 while working with others to launch A New Way, the community that we're gathered in tonight. A New Way had my heart and soul, and it still does. We created this space so people can be in a faith space and be brave. Brave enough to share that they have questions about a faith that they were handed as children. Brave enough to say they are uneducated on a particular topic and do the work to learn more. Brave enough to show up as their authentic selves and be seen and valued as the children of God that they are. Or brave enough to show up in a faith space and say, I don't even believe in God. I get that. We totally get that. My life has become a life of advocacy for the queer community, but also for Christians, working through the process of unlearning everything that we were told that Christians have to believe. I spent my time reading books about Christianity and everything that was wrong with it, but also what can still be redeemed from within it. I started a Master of Divinity program actually just this week, because I will no longer sit in a congregation and let some white dude tell me what they think the Bible is saying without me having my own education to back up my opinions as well. It means I focus on even the littlest things to let people know that they are safe. I spent the first 10 years of my career in elementary classrooms. There's one class that continues to hold a special place in my heart. I had them for 4th and 5th grade, and they all graduated high school just 2 years ago. Right after graduation, I invited as many as I could find on social media over to my house. They were such a graciously accepting class, as we had a lot of diverse needs within our group. And while many of them did not hang out in the same circles through high school, they came together that night and they loved each other just like the old days. Something as simple as grabbing that pride pack of Oreos at Target before our gathering ended up being an important event. Paying $2 more for the exact same cookie, but in a cuter package, was worth it when one student did speak up. I was mentioning the Oreos and casually, and as I opened them, we were gathered around the kitchen island, and I told them that I was a safe space for sharing as they learned more about themselves and others as they headed off to new adventures and left their childhood homes behind. I heard a huge sigh of relief from one person and looked up, and he said, "You have no idea what that means to me. My parents don't know that I'm bisexual, and they would hate me if I told them. I've heard what they say about other people, and I don't want them to say that about me." It's heartbreaking, but it's the reason I wear my pride gear regularly. And anytime I'm with a group of kids, I have a bracelet or sunglasses or something to show them that they are free to be themselves with me. The incredible people I have met in the queer community have showed me such a beautiful side of humanity. To be able to show up bravely, lean into who you really are, and love people who don't love you back is the ultimate sign of strength. May we all be like them as we continue to grow and learn in the world.
Oh my God, I think I have my first Christian girl crush. Like, she can cook, she can sing, she says penetration in church. Like, it's right here. That's right here for me. Okay. I am your last storyteller. I am Archie. Okay, done. I'm sorry, Arch. I've been told I'm not allowed to hire you back. That was an email from my director at North Park University. I'm really disappointed, especially considering that your student assessments were off the charts. He also sent a screenshot of an email he had received. The words non-missional fit and inappropriate web content stood out and punched me in the gut. I figured web content were the storytelling videos I had on YouTube, but non-missional fit and inappropriate felt like they were aimed at me. In 2018, I thought I was doing everything right to establish an academic career, and the fact that I had done so at a Christian university felt crazy, but redemptive. I've mostly experienced the fanatical and judgmental side of Christianity. In high school, I was stalked by 2 Korean girls who asked if I could have been a pig in another life and tried to convert me. In undergrad, nearly every day I walked by a preacher who screamed, "Faggots burn in hell!" And when I went to my first MFA mixer in 2014, a student from Wheaton College felt compelled to tell me that being gay was my sin. I replied, "You are really bad at icebreakers." But the teachers and students at North Park felt different. I'd started in 2015 as a guest lecturer and storyteller. Then I started hosting storytelling workshops. Then I co-taught. Upon receiving my MFA, I received my own class in 2017. I started to fall for the school's idea of service and even began to wonder if Jesus and Buddha could live together in my heart. I even went to a church service to learn what Christmas actually is. But suddenly being told I did not fit because I was inappropriate blindsided me. When I was a freshman in college, a professor told my film class that gay men were meant to be flight attendants or hairdressers. It sounds crazy until you remember employment discrimination laws didn't even start to come to be until 1988. Growing up, I learned I had to mute who I was. I had to still my hips and arms. I couldn't always be honest in conversations. I was better off staying quiet and still. This created a sense of shame about myself that I still carry and have to keep in check. Thankfully, it now rarely stops me from being the sparkling disco ball of joy that you see before you. But sometimes I still feel like alley trash. When I was told I wouldn't be invited back, I felt those feelings start to rise. My fears about getting involved at an evangelical school had come true. I had let myself feel accepted and shown who I really was. They had seen it, and now I was being uninvited. A professor that I'd worked closely with encouraged me to set up a meeting with 2 of the deans about my removal. I had the slight hope that I could show them my work and professionalism in person. Maybe they might have a change of heart. As I sat down, one of the deans introduced himself and said, "Arch, it's so nice to meet you. I just want you to know this meeting has nothing to do with your sexuality. I have gay friends." I wanted to flip the goddamn table. The professor who set up the meeting was there and presented a packet, complete with pictures of the student events I had been involved with. A couple of my students emailed testimonials. I talked about the LGBTQ storytelling event I had hosted a couple months ago, where students opened up about personal issues that deserved the school's attention. "You don't need me specifically," I said to the deans, "but you need someone who can help your queer students open up and talk. Who else on this campus wants to do that right now?" There was silence, and I thought for a moment they would see my value. "Arch, the problem is there's a donor who saw your work, and they don't believe you're someone who should be on this campus." The work in question is a story called Stripper Daddy, which talks about my experience with the sexual perceptions of Asian men and an incident of sexual trauma and assault. According to this donor, the way I told my story was unacceptable. The donor asked, if a person like me was even qualified to teach. The hypocrisy of it all was that the year prior, I had been invited to perform Stripper Daddy in the school's chapel for hundreds of their students. I reminded them of that fact and I explained that I knew Stripper Daddy was a difficult story and I'd be happy to meet with the donor to talk about it. But what if another donor sees it? You can't explain it to everyone. Let me try. But no matter what I said, it all came back to the donor until I realized no matter what evidence I gave of my contributions, no matter how well I had taught my first class, no matter how qualified I was to help their queer students, I was never going to outbid the donor. My heart sunk because while one of the deans never seemed invested in the meeting, I could tell the other dean could see my worth, but just didn't think it was worth it. I left the meeting angry that even at a Christian university, money mattered so much, but of course it does. Welcome to the world. At the same time, I felt confused because maybe it wasn't that I was gay. Maybe it was the kind of gay I am or the kind of gay things I had been through, but handpicking diversity is a fraud. The truth is, gay, straight, or somewhere in that gray space, we all have stories that are dark and can make us feel ashamed. But when we reclaim those narratives, we can turn them into something that empowers ourselves and others. And those aren't just smart words that I made up. I heard that on NPR. It may have been Terry Gross. I am a teacher with a bomb-ass background in performing, writing, and storytelling, and I wouldn't be any of that if my early 20s hadn't been difficult. It's misleading that North Park University bills itself as a place that welcomes diversity, since when it comes to accepting the stories behind that diversity, it failed. If the donor that demanded my dismissal could sit on a storytelling night like the one I experienced that semester, where students shared everything from their favorite porn stars to what stopped them from jumping off a bridge, I wonder what their reaction would be. I guess I'll just pray on it. Just kidding. It's in places like this that I feel like I have something to contribute and something to learn. You don't get to or have to stop doing what you love because someone says no. You just have to find a new way. And since that dismissal, I haven't gone back to adjuncting because I don't know how people live on that salary. But stories, creating my own and helping others share theirs, feels like my life purpose. Ain't nobody gonna keep my gay ass, flamboyant, been through some shit and still going through some shit, but I know my goddamn worth, self from doing anything. Thank you so much, everyone. That's Outspoken. That's our night here. If you have a story inside of you, please come see me. Our next Outspoken in the Western Burbs is Tuesday, November 19th at Skeleton Key. And I'm sure we'll be setting up a couple more next year here as well. So yeah, if you don't want to come to me because I'm scary, you can also go to Victoria and you can she will help you share a story at an event here as well. All right, I'm turning it over to somebody, I don't know, probably Victoria. Leslie has gone to the children, I believe.
Yeah, she's dealing with our children who are very loud. Well, thank you guys so much for being here with us at A New Way. We have a lot of interesting events coming up. You have this in front of you, which goes into our next couple of weeks. Everyone truly is welcome. All questions are welcome. All perspectives are welcome. This is why we don't have a pastor, because we don't need somebody who thinks they know everything telling us what to think. We're here to work it out together. But thank you, Archie, again for bringing Outspoken into our lives. And yeah, we're planning on February. So if you do have a story, come and see it. Yeah, that's all we got. So thank you so much. And don't forget, if you feel it in your heart, contribute to Youth Outlook or A New Way. There's boxes in the back. And take food.